include a content warning that there may be discussion of sexual violence, depression, suicide, and suicidal ideation during this event. So if you need to leave the event at any point, please feel free to sign off and come back when you're ready. There are also some resources posted in the chat. So Akshara, would you now introduce Feroza
Yeah,
to our
absolutely.
audience?
I'd love to. So Feroza is a trans activist and political advocate from Atlanta, Georgia, who played a leading role in getting out the vote and turning Georgia blue. She is a trailblazer in the building. She's a trailblazer in building community for trans people and for all South Asian LGBTQ folks. And Feroza is a possibility model for all South Asians, and particularly trans Desis and their family members. Feroza, it's really nice to have you here. We're really grateful.
Thank you so much for having me, specifically Manjula and Akshara for interviewing Aruna, for reaching out, also to Asian Q&A and Raksha, which are both amazing organizations in the Atlanta area, for their support and sponsoring the event. So I'm glad to be here.
We're really excited to get started. So just to start off, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you grew up and what you do now?
So I am 39 years old. I'm going to be 40 in April. Super excited. Trying to get some of this COVID weight off and get it right, get it tight so that I can come into 40 where I want to be. I was born in Chicago, Illinois, and Evanston area, which is kind of north, I believe, of Chicago. Lived there until about the first grade. All I really remember was snow like over my head. It was ridiculous. From there, my mom used to work for a company called GTE. And if you remember the GTEs and the MCIs and all the telecom companies, so she would move every about 5 or 6 years or so. We moved to Arizona for work, which was the exact opposite of Chicago. It was burning hot versus freezing cold. And lived there for about 2 years. And then we settled in Atlanta, Georgia, and like just the 10-county area. We've moved 2 or 3 times since we've lived here, but I've been here for roughly the last probably 30, 33 years. So I consider myself a Georgia peach for sure. When did I first know I was transgender? As early as I can remember, probably some of my first memories. I always knew that I was a woman or that I was a girl. I can probably go through and tell you one of the memories that stuck with me that was pretty hardcore. I think it was a negative, but a reprimand from my mom. I think I was 4 years old. If anybody on is Muslim, you guys know that we do a ceremony when you're 4 years old, 4 months, 4 days old. It's called a Bismillah. It's where you recite the first verse from the Quran, and all of your family kinds of comes there. So we happened to be in India at the time, and my cousin Sada and me are 30 days apart. And Sada was taking my aunt's, my mom's elder sister's ordi and wrapping it around herself. And we had kind of like a courtyard area, you know, that's open in India. Like our house had 4 walls around and then a courtyard area. And there was these things called takhats, you know, like the decks that you can sit on, and had pillows and lurtas and stuff. So all the family was sitting there, and Sada was brooming, wrapped the little ordi around her like a sari, and was sweeping the courtyard area. So I did it too. Took my mom's ordi and wrapped it around me, and I was like, oh my God, let's do this. And mommy was like, no, 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 beta. You can't do that. You can't do that here. She said, you can't do that here. She said, you can't do that here. And from those words, what I think I realized was that she, had already seen my behavior and recognized that I was, that I like to dress up like a girl, right? She also was saying, no, you can't do that here, which meant that it wasn't acceptable behavior in front of other people, and that it was a negative connotation with it, right? I think it just kind of set off the tone for me as far as not being okay with who I was. Every time I had a little inkling of showing, you know, this is who I am. I mean, through the years, I'm just shocked when my family sometimes is like, oh, you know, how could you not know? I only played with dolls. I wanted my, you know, I think they were like My Little Ponies and things like that. You know, growing up, I when all of the kids would like go outside to play like football or tag and stuff like that, I was like, oh, let's brush the, you know, my cousin's hair and stuff like that. I mean, I was just totally different. So it wasn't shocking at all. Actually, my family used to always say, you know, इन्हें तो नाहिद के बेटी के वैसा है, इन्हें he cuts all the vegetables, he cleans, he helps Nahid so much, you know. She's so grateful to have we you know, she's so lucky to have a child like her, until I actually transitioned, because then it was just horrifying and I was, you know, not acceptable at that point. But yes, ever since I can remember, I think that that's common with a lot of trans people in my experience. Even the people who transition later in life, sometimes, you know, when they're 40, 50, 60, they always knew something was there, but sometimes it takes some time to kind of go through the steps and get there. But for me, it's always been an overwhelming feeling ever since I was little. And I also knew very young that it was a negative, so I hid it.
Wow, right.
Actually, Feroza, your story so much resonated with what I went through as a mom when Akshara did something very similar to what you're saying. She often played with dolls. She only had Barbie dolls was her favorite. She only had girlfriends at that time. So totally kind of, you know, can relate to even what your mom was saying to you.
Yeah.
So, because we did the same thing. Anyway, so
but that's why we're having these conversations.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hopefully what we do is stop building into this binary so much that our kids, that our family members, you know, our young ones don't feel so bad. And I think as we start going through more some of the conversation, we're going to build up to some of the negativity that built up and what that led to. But, you know, it's not going to hurt us to just allow kids to play with what they want to play with or wear what they want to wear. And ultimately, I'd love to see where people are not in a space where everything has to be so binary. You know, boys don't do this, girls don't do that. Everything is this way or that way, especially in our culture.
Yeah.
I had two coming out stories. So I'll tell you about the first one. I was, ever since I was young, and I guess this is a space where if anybody doesn't want to hear about suicide attempts or anything like that, you may want to kind of pop out of the room for maybe about 5 minutes. But when I was younger, I knew that I was a trans woman. I had been having really negative experiences trying to kind of relay that information. I'd been hiding it for a long time. Excuse me. And I had 3 brothers. So there was no girls in the house or anything like that. So it was not a very sensitive kind of environment for me. And pretty much the only time I got to be myself was like, and I'm assuming if there's other LGBTQ people on the call or trans kids, Akshara, I'm sure you can relate, like closing the door and putting on like a black t-shirt on my hair and pretending like it was my hair, or hiding one of my mom's pairs of heels in my room or something. It was like the only time I could be myself was in my room. But then I opened my door and walked back out and it was like, okay, now you have to be this person. And it was this double life that I was living that was so hard to manage as a 13-year-old, as a 12-year-old, as an 11-year-old. Kids don't have, I don't think, that level of capacity to be 2 different people and constantly have to hide things, and the level of anxiety and trauma that kind of really starts building up on you, right, is very difficult. So by the time I was 14, I had tried killing myself 4 times, I think. Some of them were more almost like casual self-harm, like calls for help. So like I used to cut a lot on my wrist and up my arm, which is also a common behavior for sometimes LGBT kids or kids that are in trauma, is to cut themselves. But the final time that I had actually tried, I took a bunch of pills. My cousin was at home going through the medicine cabinet, just Tylenol, Advil and everything, and locked myself into my mom's bathroom. And I think I actually started throwing up at that point. And he was at home and he called my mom, and she came flying home and found me in the bathroom and started doing like saltwater drinks and stuff to vomit everything out. And just kind of, as we were doing it, she was just like, Beta, why? You know what I mean? What the hell is going on? You know what I mean? You're 14. What can bother you so much that you would want to die? You know what I mean? Why are you doing this? And at that moment is actually when she saw, because I used to wear full sleeve shirts all the time to hide some of the cuts and other things. So it was like a very not pretty coming out, like where a lot of, you know, moms and dads nowadays sit down and tape it for Instagram. And it's like, oh, I'm trans. It was me vomiting and her trying to keep me alive. And she just said, well, you can't ever do this again. You can't ever, no matter what it is, it doesn't matter what it is, you just can't do this ever again. We will figure it out and we will get through it. So I told her, I feel like a woman. I've always felt like a woman. I feel like a girl. I hate my life. I'm miserable. I can't do this anymore. I can't not be who I am and constantly have to fake it. And school sucks and everybody sucks. And I just don't want to be here anymore. And if I am who I am, you guys are going to be in pain. And if I'm not who I am, then I want to die. And I can't deal with it anymore, because a lot of it was guilt. I grew up in a very conservative Muslim family. As far as Islam is even concerned, there's like Shias and there's Sunnis, and then within Sunnis, our branch of that Islam is like almost like the Jehovah's Witnesses, right? Of Muslims, like very, very strict, meditate in the morning, meditate in the evening. You know, but by the time we were, 5 to 7 years old, we were all reading Quran. We were fasting at like 7. I mean, like it was a very strict upbringing. So a lot of shame and guilt about what would happen to them. And I just didn't want to come out. So that was the first coming out. And after that, she was like, okay, we'll figure it out. And we'll put you in therapy. And at the time, she thought that my therapist she was taking me to was going to fix me. But it ended up being a specialist in gender dysphoria, which was the most amazing thing that ever happened to me, because she was like, oh, this is normal. It's okay. You exist. There's people like you that exist. And it was the first time I had ever heard. Keep in mind, guys, this is before the internet and before even cell phones. I think we had the texting cell phones where you had to click it 3 times on a Nokia to text. Okay. So way back in the day. My second coming out experience was 3 years ago on February 1st of 2018. It was my anniversary just about a week and a half ago. And by second coming out, what I mean is that I came out as a trans woman at 14. I transitioned at 19. I went through college, lived my whole life, but I have something that's called passing privilege, which when you look at me, you can't tell that I'm a trans woman. And based on a lot of my experiences in life, I've gone into hiding and not really out there talking about being a trans woman. So I settled in my career, my life as a broker and everything else as just, a cisgender woman in a sense, had the suburban kind of life, got married. We were thinking about having children and did the whole 9. And then I came back out on February 1st. And that experience was completely different. Absolutely positive, full of love and embrace. People, whether it was my clients, my work, at the time, my in-laws had not known. I had been with my ex-husband at that time for like 12 years roughly, and they didn't know. Everybody was just super supportive, super loving, and very, very accepting. So it was a really different experience from the first go around. So my family struggled culturally, religiously. My parents are in a place now where both of them are really, really supportive. And oddly enough, even my father has kind of come along quite a bit now. This photo is of me from my high school graduation and my senior portrait, the next one, compared to me now. Sorry for the gandagi. Have a lot of South Asian aunties on this call. I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I had a little too much showing there. But yeah, so those are the differences between what I looked like back then. You guys can see that I had some chiseled features. So if there's any younger trans kids on the call, if there's any parents looking right now, this is a really great example of what hormone therapy and years of living in your gender can do, because I don't have any facial surgeries on the right. My jawline and everything has just transitioned purely from like hormone therapy and gender affirming surgery. So
Nice.
Anyways, initially they both were very, very against the idea, right? So my mom was like, just don't do this again, right, beta, when I came out. And we're going to fix this. And then took me to a therapist, and the therapist ended up putting me into an LGBTQ youth group that was really supportive. It was my first time ever seeing other trans, gay, bisexual kids. It's something that I would definitely recommend once COVID is over for any of the parents that are on here, is find a local PFLAG group or another youth group for your kids. Super important in those teen years and early adolescence to have other kids that are like them. Representation really matters. When I came out, they did not allow me to transition. So from 14 to 19, they said I was too young. I didn't know what I was doing. It was a phase. I would get over it and I would grow on and move on past it. So from 14 to 19, one of the biggest issues I had with me was that even though the times were different, I knew that I was going to continue to grow as a boy. And it was a very kind of real hard dysphoric time for me, because every day that more hair grew on me, I knew it was going to take years to take that off. If my Adam's apple got more pronounced or my shoulders were getting wider, it was really, really difficult for me. So though I had come out, and they were okay, they weren't willing to help me take the actual steps to be who I wanted to be. And I don't think they understood what that looked like. At 19, once I went to college on scholarships for my own, and they had no financial or kind of control over me anymore, I immediately transitioned. I think it was my freshman year or my sophomore year of college. And as soon as I transitioned and kind of went back, my dad, just really, really super struggled with pronouns. And it wasn't even a struggle as much as it was almost like a purposeful, I'm not accepting this kind of thing, right? And then with, that was a photo of me and my mom at my Sangeets, just so you guys know, the gold. And my mom, though always accepting, again, Indian culture, right? Like often women kind of are a little bit more submissive to their husbands and the husband's roles. And, culturally, religiously speaking, everybody was like, oh, it's a sin, she's going to burn in hell and you guys can't support her and you can't financially help her. You can't do anything. So those initial years of transition were very difficult. My extended family stopped talking to me altogether. I have 40 cousins and uncles and aunts in the Atlanta area. Not one of them really is close to me, doesn't really talk to me. Every now and then I see them at family gatherings if my mom does stuff, and it's, basically if I get a salam, it's okay, right? Things are slightly changing now, oddly enough, these last 2 or 3 years. There's more trans stuff is in the media, and as I think I've also gained a little bit more notoriety as an activist and an advocate in the Atlanta area, working on certain campaigns or being in articles and stuff, that I think my family really sees that, like, wow, she's kind of flourishing for who she is, and maybe they're seeing that they may not have been correct. But it's a little damaged the relationships, I think, at this point, to really ever kind of rebuild some of those relationships. But these last 2 years, I have really started loving myself more so than I ever have. And I think that that's what's really, really helped blossom my parents, more specifically my dad, these last 2 years, because I think he sees that I'm not just going to lay down and take what it is. This was at the Trans March in DC, the brown plus Muslim plus female plus immigrant plus trans equals human. I did want to do a disclosure that said daughter of immigrants, but I couldn't really fit that in, and I didn't think it worked well with the sign, just so y'all know. I was born in Chicago, but.
Great.
Oh, wow.
Thank you so much, Feroza. I mean, that was really beautiful. And just to let you know that we are here for you also.
Yeah,
we have lots of community. We have chosen family, and a lot of us who didn't have the experiences that maybe Akshara or some of the other folks are having here, that have young kids that are super, that are supportive. A lot of us found our own ways to make family. Like Aparna and Shimon are both on this call right now from Q&A and Raksha, which are the two organizations that work. But Aparna has been like an older sister to me my whole life, ever since I came out when I was like 15 to 19. I think I met her in that age group. And then her nephew Shimon is like my little sister now.
Oh,
so lovely. Yeah.
When I went through a lot of the troubles when I was younger, and this is a really valid point for a lot of the parents who are on here who have younger trans kids, maybe, is that, the negativity that I think I saw when I first came out, that I went through, really pushed me away from my culture, from my religion, and from my family in that way. My extended family stopped talking to me, mistreated me very badly. My own parents were struggling at the time. And it's so funny because now even my dad will be like, oh, Islam this or that, or you should do this and you should pray. But I'm like, the whole 20 years of experience of what I was going through, rather than saying, oh, we love you, we accept you, come here, or, do puja with us, or go read namaz with us, or do the things that we want to do. When we use religion or culture to kind of push those kids away, then you can't really fault the kids for not really feeling interconnected. I find that I'm more in tune with who I am as an Indian South Asian, Indian American South Asian woman, now than I ever have before. I love my culture. I always have. I just think that over a period of time, I pushed myself really away from it because it was a buffering in a sense of being like, okay, well, if I don't accept this portion of my identity, it can't hurt me, right? And if my cousins, my family, Indian people are not going to accept me, they're not going to love me, they're not going to be okay with me, well, then I don't need them. I'm just going to be, you know, this version of me. I'll be the westernized girl and do that. And now you can see I have chumkas on and big nose rings. I'm always wearing saris, and I love that aspect. I just think that I had to really fall back in love with it when I fell back in love with myself, really accepting and loving myself, because there's portions that I had kind of, you know, put away for a long time. This is from a photo shoot for Q magazine. I got to be Princess Jasmine. And we had 5 trans and TGNC. So if any of you guys have young kids, you guys can look it up. It was like a fairy tale photo shoot, fairy tale trans photo shoot. You can Google it. But there was a Prince Charming. There was Belle from from Beauty and the Beast. She was white. We had a Latinx woman do Pocahontas. And we had a beautiful Black trans woman do, what's the princess from with the frog? I can't think. It was way after I grew up. Huh?
Tiana?
Tiana. She was Tiana. Yeah. So that was beyond my years, Tiana. I can tell you all about Cinderella and the 7 dwarfs and stuff like that. So yeah, it was a really cool photo shoot.
Oh my God, yeah, you look beautiful.
Thanks. Yeah, they did my hair and makeup. I wanted to just keep that braid in forever. Passing privilege for me has been a crazy, crazy part of my life, because it's been a really, really big benefit. And at times it's also been a negative. The benefit is just like any other privilege, right? We have racial privilege, socioeconomic privilege, you know, any other kinds of privilege. It's really pushed me and allowed me to be successful in my career, for people to take me at face value as a cisgendered woman, to be accepted into society in a lot of different ways that I think trans women who might not have that privilege struggle with more.
Really quick, sorry. Could you also just explain what passing privilege is for people who
Yes, so passing privilege is the ability to pass as a biological or cisgendered person. So if you're a trans man, you look like a man that was born a man. And if you're a trans woman, you look like you were just born a woman. So I'm 5'4.5". For the vast majority of my life, I was about 120, 25 pounds, something that's tiny, and nobody could really tell. Like I said earlier, I was even married for 11 to 12 years. Me and my ex-husband were together, and none of my in-laws knew until when I came out in February 2018.
Right.
So that's what passing privilege is. The negative connotations of passing privilege for me, which I don't think compare to maybe the benefits that I reaped from being in passing privilege, was that I always had to disclose, right? So it's not something that somebody could ever tell with me. And this is one of the things where we're going to talk just a hair about some sexual violence. So again, if you guys need to step out, you might want to. For me, the concern was always that when I was pre-op, and I was dating people, I obviously still had to disclose, and I always would have disclosed and still do to this day, regardless, that I'm a trans woman. But at the time when I was younger, there was actual physical reasons why you would have to disclose, right? That you were dating somebody. I never liked to even kiss a guy without telling them who I was as a person. I had lost lots of women in my life growing up, more specifically Black trans women. Not uncommon, and it's not uncommon to this day for Black trans women to be murdered. But when I would come out, I would often face violence because a man would be attracted to me, think that I'm exotic, beautiful. It would be at a bar, a restaurant, a grocery store. It didn't matter where it was. And at some point, I used to always, oh, well, let me text them or, you know, date. And rejection is a big thing in the TGNC community, right? Like as trans women, we're constantly told we're not enough women. We're not acceptable to date. We're fetishized. We're sexualized. We're all sorts of different things. And I just got tired of it. So I would all, you know, guys would walk up to me and I would just be like, hey, you know, thanks for the compliment, but I'm a trans woman or whatever. And you know, that sometimes led to people spitting in my face or pushing me or choking me out or, you know, throwing me down a stairwell. I've been sexually assaulted and raped. it's not been the best of experiences. I mean, some of these things are like 20 years old. Some of them were me being young and silly and not knowing how to protect myself best, where to disclose, how to disclose in public settings versus private settings. Those are all conversations that I think that as you guys are, some of your kids are going to college, that they're growing up, they're trans women, if they're pre-op, those are conversations that are very important to have with your children, that you don't want to just disclose, particularly in different spaces, how to disclose safely, um, and to always and to always disclose if they feel safe. I mean, it's one of the things that I've also seen is a lot of girls not disclosing early on and then getting themselves into sticky situations where the person doesn't know their TGNC, and then this has started forming into some emotional connection, which can also create spaces of harm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that.
I know. Thank you so much, Feroza. And as a mom, I can say that I'm always concerned whether Akshara will become a statistic. And that's something that I keep telling her, that how to be safe,
Right.
Yeah.
of being out and open. So
Absolutely.
thank you.
Overwhelmingly, my second coming out was the catalyst for me being an activist. This is Senator Warnock, who just won in Georgia. He had done a Desi event here at Patel Plaza. And then that was me as a Handmaid's Tale, the one where we dressed up and went to the Capitol and stood for women's rights, because trans women are women, and functioning our bodies, especially trans men, still may need access to birth control and child rearing and all sorts of stuff. So, and abortion. But yeah, so my second coming out story is what was the catalyst for me being a trans woman. An activist and an advocate. And how that all happened was I just had an overwhelming feeling that I needed to come back out. Trump had won in 2016.
Mhm.
Every aspect of my identity, my Muslim identity, my trans identity, my womanhood, being a person of color, everything was under attack. There was bans every week on Muslim bans, trans bans, this or that or the other. And it just felt like I couldn't hide who I was anymore. And though I would give him some of that credit, I also think that I was unhappy in my marriage. I had really kind of dumbed myself down as far as who I was as a person. I wasn't being social anymore. I wasn't going out. I wasn't doing the things that brought me joy. I wasn't helping people.
Right.
Similarly, in my own family, the agreement was that, Feroza, you have passing privilege. I had 6 nieces and nephews at the time, under 6 years old. All of my brothers were under agreement that if we didn't have to say anything about it, we didn't want to talk about it. We also didn't want to, quote unquote, expose the kids to the gay or the trans nature, which, and again, Muslim, Indian cultures, South Asian, Desi cultures is not uncommon. Like, oh, well, let's not talk about this, it's going to go away, or let's not bring this up because we may, quote unquote, expose the kids. And I am the prime example of how you cannot straightify a trans person, right? Or a gay person, or anything. Like these kids, the kids that are South Asian, that show who they are and struggle through these identities for years and come out and do that, it shows you that you cannot expose other kids to something that they are not in and of itself, because if not, I would be a cisgendered male sitting here right now in front of you. Right? So it's kind of a futile attempt of making kids,
For sure.
trying not to expose kids or whatnot. Long story short, I just didn't feel like I was living up to who I was and in my light and being who I am. That led to a lot of weight gain, depression, was not able to work as much. And I just kept having these overwhelming feelings of like, you need to be who you are. And you keep talking about, even in political spectrums and other things like that, oh, I'm a trans woman. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm a Muslim woman. I'm a brown woman. I'm a woman. I'm a daughter of Indian immigrants. But when it came to that trans identity of my portion, I just never felt safe doing it based on the experiences I had when I was younger. Also, I'd set up a multi-million-dollar brokerage career in real estate. I didn't want to lose my clients, which felt like, oh my God, they're all going to turn on me. My brokerage may fire me. I didn't know what was going to happen. I kept having these feelings again and again and again. And in fall of 2017, I started talking to people. I came out to somebody at work. My friend at work told me, oh, you should tell Lisa, our broker. She would be totally fine. I told my dental hygienist, And she was like, oh my God, I would have never known, ha ha ha, ha. Right. And we were chatting and just started building up like little energy. And every single one was a good experience. Every single one was like, oh my God, you're so pretty. I would have never known. And blah, blah, blah. And it was not the same as 20 years ago, like, you know, people mistreating me. And it was on my own terms. Finally built up the courage on February 1st to tell my mother-in-law. We met at or ex-mother-in-law. We met at a Longhorn Steakhouse in Dublin, Georgia, which was halfway between Savannah and here, because I didn't want her staying with me for 3 days after I told her. Because now you guys have to remember, obviously, whether we're Indian or not, right? All mother-in-laws want bache. Okay, so she's all like, oh my God, will you have kids when are you gonna have kids? When are you gonna have kids? So I'm like, oh, I'm early onset menopause. I can't have kids. So I like had this whole lie concoction, right? And so then I was like, oh, how awkward would it be if she stayed with me for 3 days, right? Or if I went down there and then stayed in her space for 3 days after telling her that I had been lying to her for 13 years, 12 years. So I told her and she was super accepting. And when she was super accepting, she was like, oh my God, you know, why didn't you tell me earlier? And, you know, your father-in-law, my father-in-law had passed of cancer about 4 or 5 years before this. He was like, he would have loved you. And I was like, I know, it was for me, my parents knew. And I dealt with so much stuff with my parents and my family with passing privilege. I didn't really care to have my in-laws. No, it was not something that I wanted to share. I enjoyed the love and affection I got as their superstar realtor daughter-in-law that was not trans, that was stunning, that did modeling stuff and did other things. And they thought the world of me. And I didn't want that to be a factor in how they looked at me. And so that was kind of the catalyst for me coming out. And then I went home and I had written this whole thing that I was going to use as a letter, which was my initial Facebook post about being I'm a trans woman that went kind of semi-viral. That was the speech or whatnot letter that I was going to give to my mother-in-law. But I edited it, added stuff to it, put a photo up and just put it on that Facebook. Because at that day, when I came home, I said, if my mother-in-law doesn't care, my boss knows now, people at work know, a couple people know, who cares anymore? If you don't want to use me for business, don't use me for business. If you don't want to be my friend, don't be my friend. I don't care. I didn't think that it was going to go crazy. I thought it was being all super awesome and strong and put it on there. And then it started going viral. And like, you know, 10, 20 minutes in, it was like 60, 80, 100, 150 shares. I mean, and then I started crying and I was like, oh my God, you know, my mom and dad again. And I think I shared this last week or 2 weeks ago on a Brown Girl magazine thing. But I'm going to say it here because it really matters. Because even in that moment where I thought I was so strong, so vulnerable, I love myself, screw it, everything is over. I saw the likes and post shares going up and I called my mommy and I was like, oh my God, Mom, I did it. I came out, but I didn't think this was going to go crazy. And now it's going crazy. And you know, I've caused you guys so much pain, so much trauma. And my mom and dad have had a lot of crazy stuff in Atlanta, Desi community, back home in Hyderabad. It's just been a lot for them. So I called her crying, saying, you know, I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was going to go crazy, right? And she said, Bita, we love you. It's time you love yourself. And in that moment, I realized that even when I thought I was loving myself beyond, I had this structure ingrained in me so much of my parents always being above me and everything else mattering more than me, that I didn't take a minute to truly love myself. And that, her giving me that moment after, think about this now, I'm 30, at this point, 37 years old, right? And that acknowledgement to be like, Jao beta, be you, right? Do you, we love you. It's fine, just let it go finally, is what I think was the catalyst to just be like me, and just go out. And I left my husband 2 months later. It's like, screw this, I'm not happy. I love you, you love me, but we're not meant to be. Great, boom, career blew up, hit 10 million in sales plus that year. Activism and advocacy, that year, I ended up being on stage with Wanda Sykes, Tig Notaro. I think I interviewed Chan France for his book opening. I got to be Grand Marshal for Pride. I was 8 Atlanta ambassador. Things just really popped off in a way. And the funny thing was, I didn't think I was going to be an activist. I mean, if you ask, again, Aparna is on here, my friend Shimon, several of my friends, I didn't know that I was going to be an activist when I did it. I just knew I had 15 minutes of fame. And what do you do with that 15 minutes of fame? How do you make a difference for your community? What I did know, having a marketing experience and having a sales background, was that this was a once in a lifetime opportunity to take my voice and use it and see if I can do something with it. And I was very authentic in what my wants were. And I think that that's why I've continued to be a successful activist and an advocate, is because I do things that matter to me from the heart. I say what I want when I want, and I'm also very vulnerable and open. Nowadays, for the most part, it's been semi-positive. Like I said, in the past, when it was negative, it was generally cisgendered men who were, you know, attracted to me. And in those experiences, and even now, like when I'm on dating apps and things like that, I just literally just say, I'm a trans woman, out, post-op. If you don't like it, swipe one way, swipe the other way. As far as friends, family, community, and everybody else, I don't care anymore. So it's just like, you know, if you don't love me, if you don't want to be around me, you don't want to be in my life, you don't want to be in my circle, don't. I don't run around and just tell everybody I'm trans, right? So like when I take out a client, and the other day we had $1 million client, and it was like, oh, hey, I'm trans, but I don't hide it anymore either. So like if somebody said something, or, oh, hey, we Googled you on an article, or if something came up even in conversation, it's very freeing for me now, in the sense that I don't have that. I used to always be like, oh, from this experience, I would want to talk from an experience, but then muffle myself down or stifle my voice. And in that sense, I think it's just been really life-changing to be out at a restaurant, or somebody says something, or one time I was in a grocery store and somebody had said something about a trans person. I was like, oh, I'm trans. And they were like, holy crap, you know what I mean? Which I used to do when I was like Muslim people, you know, because I show my body and stuff. People would say, oh, you know, something about a Muslim person. I'd be like, I'm Muslim, you know, why did you say that? And kind of correct the behavior.
Yeah.
And now I don't have those kinds of limitations. Now, you know, I still live in Georgia. I still want to be smart. It's not like I'm running around in a t-shirt that says I am a trans woman in North Georgia, you know, when I go hiking, where there's like bunches of Confederate flags, but safe, careful, 10-county area in Atlanta and most major cities, you're going to be fine, and just be who you are. I don't hide it anymore. This is a really amazing experience and shocking situation for me, because I never thought that coming out would actually help my business. I always thought I was going to lose business, which I did. When I first came out, the first year when I came out, I lost 3 clients. All of them were South Asian. And one of them happened to be a developer that was working with me. Oh my God, the contacts from the 1990s. Everybody remembers the light contacts. Don't act like you guys are not all Desi on here. We all used to wear these light green and blue contacts. It was Aishwarya did it. She ruined it for all of us. But when when I came out, I just never thought that my business would grow from it. So oddly enough, I think this is something to talk about, because we're on a forum with South Asian folks, mostly parents here. And, you know, I think one of the concerns that often we have when we have trans kids or LGBTQ kids is success, love, safety, being able to be, you know, functioning members of society and everything else. And I think I'm a great example in that one way, that even somebody who came out like 20 years ago, right? I've built myself a multi-million-dollar real estate career through everything, through all of the experiences I've had. I'm a top producer at my brokerage firm 5 years in a row. And our office is, you know, one of the #1 offices in all of Atlanta.
Wow.
Aside from just that, even within my own family, it's oddly enough, sometimes it's the kids that have the most going on, you know, lesbians, gay, trans, otherwise, who are the ones who are like star students. So like I have 3 brothers. I was the one who could have, I had scholarships to like Stanford, Mercer. You know, at the time, my mom wanted to keep us all close to her bosom, so I didn't go there. I was supposed to go to Emory and be a doctor. And my senior year of high school, I decided that I just couldn't do it anymore, because I got a job at Starbucks, where it's a long story, but anyways, all the people were studying to be doctors for 12 hours a day, and I was working at a barista, and I was like, I don't want to do this. This doesn't look fun. So it changed my mind. So I ended up going to Georgia State. But I think that, yeah, it's really important for parents on the call to know that like we can all grow, flourish. It's just a matter of having a healthy, supportive, loving environment, putting your kids' needs first if you can. And some of us are tough enough that even if we don't have that, we get through and we do what we need to do. But it is definitely possible to be successful, be, you know, doctors, lawyers, attorneys. I'm so proud to hear, Akshara, that you're going to school for law. I mean, it's great to hear from a second generation of TGNC people coming behind us that, like, you know, we're not limiting ourselves, and that our parents are sitting next to us and supporting us through these transactions. And now the funny thing is my mom is exactly like Manjula is. I wish she could have been here today to be on the call, but you know, when I was Grand Marshal and everything else, articles, things like that, she shares them in the family WhatsApp group. And she's like, oh, you know, everybody doesn't have to talk to my daughter because now the whole world loves my daughter. Or like, you know what I mean? Like when I was on CNN, or it's just so funny. Or, oh, you know, Feroza's on the LGBTQ advisory board with her mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms. You know, she just does those little jabs to make sure that everybody knows that, you know, all the people who still don't talk to me to this day, she's like, yeah, my daughter's the bomb. For young trans kids or anybody who's trans or LGBTQ watching this, love yourself. Love yourself, not like, you know, the bullshit love yourself, not like the love yourself where I posted even on Facebook that I'm trans and that I love myself, but love myself like how I loved myself when my mom told me to love myself, that I stopped putting anybody above me, anyone above me and my energy, whether it's your husband, whether you're a kid or you're an adult, whether it's your partners, it's your friends, your career, your parents, anybody. It's one thing to love somebody so much that you honor them, that you respect them, that you treat them with everything, but at your own expense, doing it is just not healthy. And we have this in our community, in our culture, where we rear women, specifically young girls, to be super women, to be wives, mothers, daughters, sisters, caregivers, money makers, housekeepers, mothers and cooks and everything else. And we expect so much, but with so little regard for themselves and how to love themselves and put themselves first. So it's something that I've really experienced. And often when people see this kind of enormous growth that I've had over the last 3 years, they're like, what is the secret? What did you do? And it's really nothing other than me just loving myself, but not enough in a way where I'm like, oh yeah, I love myself. It's truly putting myself first, and nobody else comes above me anymore, including my own parents. And as much as I love them, or my brothers or my nieces or my nephews or my family, it's always has to be me first, because when I'm not whole, I'm really not present in a way that's helpful for other folks. And that's what I've learned over these last couple of years. So to my trans sisters, younger siblings, LGBTQ kids that are watching this, love yourself in that way. To trans, LGBTQ, otherwise parents, I know it's a process. My parents did not just start loving me for who I was the minute I came out. And I ask you to constantly challenge yourself in little ways to grow daily and see ways that you can improve. This is something that, you know, I often tell trans kids when I talk to TGNC kids, you know, your parents had expectations of you, right? From a young age of, oh, my daughter's going to get married and I'm going to have this big shadi, or my, you know, son, quote unquote, is going to have 3-4 kids. And this is, there's just hopes, dreams, a name attached to it, all these things. And we expect as TGNC folks or LGBTQ kids that when we come out, we know who we are. Our identities have been in our back of our heads for 10 years while we've been fighting whether we should come out or not, 20 years, 30 years, right? But our parents, sometimes when we come out, it's like the first time they've experienced that, right? Or heard that. And for them, it's jarring, or, you know, they're trying to catch their bearings. And the expectation sometimes for trans kids or LGBT kids is immediately that, well, I love myself, so you have to love me now. And our parents didn't have that 10 years, 20 years, 15 years, 30 years to process us loving ourselves. So it's going to take them that same amount of time to figure out, maybe not that same amount of time, but some time to figure that out. So what I would say to trans kids, also be patient with your parents, but for parents themselves, I know it's a process. I know it takes some time. I know you're not going to maybe like wake up overnight and be where you need to be, but constantly find small ways to challenge yourself to do a little bit more, love your child authentically, and everything else is just going to come along. Yeah, I think that it's worldwide. What we're facing right now is, trans rights, LGBTQ rights across the world. And I think that, just like everything else that's going on in our culture affects us here as, part of the diaspora. Um, that this is also an aspect of it that's going to affect us, right? What's happening in the homeland is what we're going to kind of look to, because when you really think about it, oddly enough, like how many of us moved to America, and then my parents, I always used to say it was America outside, but when I came to the door and stepped through the door, it was India inside the house, right? So you still took off your shoes, hindi mein baat karna pada, you know what I mean? Growing up inside the house, we ate all the same foods we did in India. So it's funny because I think that ultimately inside the house, it was still that. So when we're changing the belief systems, I think in the motherland, a lot of that's going to push back out to our generation, especially my parents' generation, and people who are a little bit older are really going to look to that as a model. So when we looked at women's rights issues, a lot of the stuff that was going around with India's daughter and the protest that happened on a national level across India. I think that we saw, a lot of growth there. Then we also saw the bill reversed where it was criminalized for LGBTQ folks. I think that makes it a little bit more acceptable on a international level, and for people who are our parents are seeing that on their Indian TV channels and watching news and stuff like that, then I think they're kind of coming along, because I think it's, for my family at least, I don't know about everybody's family, though we were growing up in America, a lot of our culture, a lot of the things they watched, news, dramas, movies, everything else growing up was all still coming from the homeland. So it wasn't something where there was like, yeah, we were watching the news here too, but they were also watching everything that was happening in India. So when things affect us there, I think things definitely affect us here. I think it depends. I think that as the larger Desi community becomes more open-minded, understanding, and accepting, it'll be fine for us to kind of maybe move into those circles a little bit more. And I'm really proud to see so many parents and family supportive family members, or just even allies on this call, kind of coming in to see what the experience is like for LGBTQ people and trans people, because that's, I think, what's going to change this conversation. But in the meantime, what I really love about this right now is that it's a time like no other before in our history, in the sense that we have all these social media connections, we have abilities, we have conferences, we have Desi Q, we have Q&A, we have Desi Rainbow Parents, we have Parivar in California. We have so many awesome, absolutely, Satranga, so many great organizations that are providing a sense of community. So for a lot of us that have lacked that space for feeling and community and wanted to have South Asian or Desi spaces, we're finally getting those spaces and have those spaces to be in safely. So it's kind of like what I tell trans kids as far as your family, right? You're letting your parents grow. You're letting them come to where you need to be. We have the right as LGBTQ people, or as people in general, to have chosen family. So if you have to choose your family for a little bit while your other family comes along, then that's what I would recommend to do. But I think that in today's day and age, I think we're maybe a little bit more physically safe than we've been in the past, but emotionally wise, like, I don't just open myself up to the Desi community like that if it's not necessarily LGBTQ. Within my own family, I do go to events here and there, but I walk in and don't really give anybody the time of day because they don't have any effect on me anymore, if that makes sense. And until somebody respects me, values me, loves me, and wants to be around me, then why should I go out of my way to be like, oh, hello, 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 you know what I mean? And go out of my way. And then it's not what I want to do. So I think it's a complicated question. If the community around you, the greater community around you is supportive, then heck yes. If not, find your own chosen family. For me, I think that what I would tell any child, which is what I tell my nephews every day, whenever I talk to them, that I love them, that they are beautiful, that they're smart, they're going to be somebody. Just give them happiness, growth, inspire them to be the best person that they can be, and always kind of be supportive. As a 9-year-old person, I don't think that that child right now needs to really dive so much into the subtleties. It's so funny. I don't know if you guys know who Jennifer Cardin-Slipikoff is. She works for Human Rights Campaign. She's one of the parents of a trans daughter who's about 12 or 13 in the Atlanta area, but huge activist for Human Rights Campaign, which is one of the more international organizations that does HRC. And She always tells me, my daughter is like, God, mom, do we have to talk about trans stuff now? Like, do we have to do this? It's so funny, right? Because the child herself is like, ugh, I'm like a teen, leave me alone. And the parent is like dragging her like, hey, we got to do this, we got to do that, we have to change the world. And she wants a better space for her child, but her child just wants to be a child, right? So funny enough, we kind of giggle because at 9, 10, 12, 13, 15, I think that you're really just providing as a parent a super safe space for your child to flourish, grow, unconditional love, being supportive, and talking all the time. What do you need? You know, one of the things that I've really learned in my sales career, in my personal life, and after my last failed relationship is how to listen. What do you need? What are you struggling with right now? Is there some way I can make things easier for you, beta? You know what I mean? Are you happy? Constantly having these check-ins and just saying, are you okay? You're loved. Do you need anything? The child in growing up in an environment like yours, where it's accepting and loving, is likely going to tell you, this is what I need. This is what I want. This is what would make me happier, because they're growing up in that background. It's the kids who don't have the parents who are sitting on this call right now that I worry about, who don't have people to check in and are asking those kinds of questions. As far as the subtleties, when we get into hormonal stuff, one of the things that I would really ask a lot of you guys to consider, and I know that it's very daunting to think, but you guys know your child and your child knows themselves. At 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, I can guarantee you if your child has been trans and out for 7 years, 8 years, or telling you that they are a trans girl, allow them to do hormone blockers, please. At least hormone blockers, if not starting them on estrogens. The reason why is because for you guys, it may be like, oh, well, we're taking these steps, or maybe we're moving too fast or anything else. For me, it was $15,000 worth of electrolysis to remove my beard. Every single follicle of my hair was a needle going into that pore, electrocuting it, burning it, then tweezing out the hair again and again and again on every single hair on my face for 7 years to get to where I am now. The expense, the cost, the money, the mental anguish, certain things you can't even change. Adam's apples, shoulders, hands, feet, height, things that you might be able to suppress a little bit, voice control. People do thousands of dollars in just learning how to talk again. These kinds of things make a big, big difference. So when you get to that age where we're talking about, you know, puberty and changing, please be open-minded to at least hormone blockers is the one thing I'd say to parents of trans kids. Something as an activist. What I've learned after doing this for years is that people don't just hate us to hate us, right? Whether you're a woman or you're Muslim or you're Black or you're trans. Most people who have some sort of dislike almost or hate always stems from fear, right? Because they fear that person. They don't really know enough about that community. They don't know about Muslims. They think Sharia law is coming to America. Trans people, they think they're going to rape their kids in the bathroom because this is what they're seeing on Fox Media or whatever. You know, it just depends, right? Each different thing. That fear is actually rooted in ignorance. So it's hate is rooted in fear. Fear is rooted in ignorance. And that ignorance is how we're going to solve these issues. Us being angry, screaming at people, trying to defriend them, and I'm not talking to you, even in our own families and other folks, doesn't particularly bring anybody along for the ride, right? It just separates us from them. And yes, not everybody has the capacity at times, like even right now, you probably are angry or frustrated and you know yourself. You're like, I'm going to get angry, but I'm not going to deal with it. Once you can finally get to a point where you can move beyond some of that anger, some of that hurt, and some of that pain, I think as a community, how we're going to change things is actually having these micro conversations, having these uncomfortable conversations with our friends, with our families, with other people, when we see these things happening, and rather than shutting down or coming from a place of anger or hurt, coming from a place of education. Honestly, I'm sorry. What you're saying is absolutely incorrect. This is not right. Like when we're looking at the trans athletes conversation that's happening right now all over the national media, and what's happening right now with Georgia putting another bill forward for trans kids not to be able to compete. The stats are just all there. Like there's absolutely science-based wise, it doesn't make sense. So I have to find ways, no matter how angry I get the gender, I have to like literally take a moment sometimes and be like, ugh, okay. Statistically, this is what happened. This is how long hormones take to take any perceived advantage out of your system, blah, 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 blah. And once I lay down these facts and educate somebody, honestly, they can just shut down and walk away, or they have to face the fact, right? And at that point, once they're educated, hopefully we're pulling them along with us slowly but surely into growing. And I think that that's what it's going to be for any aspect of our community right now that we're dealing with. We're going to have to constantly talk, inform, educate, and pull people along with us. And it's so hard. Some days I do have moments. I'm sure you guys have seen a couple Facebook posts of mine that I'm like, shut up. But other than that, usually for the most part, so let's talk very specifically about South Asian culture, internalized racism, how we have our own issues with racism within and colorism within South Asian culture first, okay? Because that's, I think, a big issue that we're having across the board in South Asian, East Asian, and Latinx cultures as well, right? Grew up in families where, you know, the darker your skin, the less likely you are to get married, the less want they have for people. Colorism is very, very prevalent. If we're going to talk about how to save trans women of color, which are predominantly Black trans women, so let's be very clear, again, when we say trans women of color, we're including one or two people. We're really only talking about Black trans women because we've lost 3 Black trans women in Atlanta. I think the big word there is Black. So let's break that down first and have some conversations about racism in our own culture, how we can be more supportive, how we can get rid of colorism, how we can love people for who they are, and provide equity across the board on just race. Then we throw the trans situation back in there and we can talk about Black trans women. If you're going to ask me what to do, I'm not a Black trans woman, so I won't speak to it. What I'll say is follow the lead of Black trans women organizers. That's what I do. In Atlanta, I work with multiple different organizers who are changing things for the better. There's multiple organizations here that are led by Black trans women. So in your local city, your local state, where you are, if you want to make a difference, donate funds to those organizations. So in Atlanta, I can just name off a couple. There's like Transcending Barriers, which is run by Dion Kettle and Zahara Green. There is THAP, Trans Housing Atlanta program, that works predominantly with POC folk. I am on the board for Trans Housing Coalition. We're currently in the process of emergency housing up to 40 TGNC Black trans women, mostly. We've permanently housed in long-term housing now 30 people, 25 people roughly. So we're doing the work in that way, but I'm trying to follow the lead of the community. So like if somebody was to talk to Desi people about maybe how to change things, and it was somebody who did not look like us and did not talk like us, did not know our lived experience, I think it's very important that we probably wouldn't be paying as much attention as you guys are to somebody who happens to be of South Asian descent speaking to you guys about these experiences. Same thing there. If we're going to talk about trans women being murdered, the community who's being murdered is Black trans women. So I say we elevate and uplift those voices and listen to the organizers that sit in those spaces and try to take their lead. I would organize, I would follow organizers. I would definitely call your legislators. So even if you're not from Georgia, for example, right now there's a bill in Georgia, and there's about over the United States, I think there's been about 11 of these bills introduced, especially since Biden has come back out and done all this crazy stuff. So it's not just Georgia. But I would definitely call these state legislators, the sponsors, tell them how you feel about them. And then as these bills are coming up in state legislatures, it's very important for you to call down the line and make sure you're actually doing a little bit of work to let these elected people know that you do not want these kinds of bills being passed in your state legislature, if that makes sense. And then I would definitely give money to the organizations that are doing the work. Aside from that, I think that we're looking at a more overwhelming change, as I kind of mentioned in the past again, of systemic racism and transphobia, which is not something that we can individually knock out. What we can do is have those conversations and educate. But that's probably the best that I can do for how to support trans women who are being murdered. I think that in South Asian culture, we don't have enough in Desi culture of an importance on therapy and really talking to people. I think it's very helpful. We take the whole world's stress on our shoulders. And as I said, a lot of times women specifically, and don't have outlets for ourselves to actually have those spaces. Our culture can also be very, almost, it's also competitive, but kind of, you know, very, it's weird. You don't share things that are going on in your family or the issues that you're having, right? Our culture is almost repressive in that way, more so than other cultures, in my opinion, where like my mom didn't call people to talk to people about her daughter being trans because it was shameful. It was very, you know, a negative connotation to that. And then she didn't feel like she could open up. So like at the time when my mom was going through that, or when I was going through that, having a therapist would have been absolutely amazing to do that. So therapy is really, really great. I think that my doctor, the gender dysphoria specialist, saved my life when I was 14, the one my mom took me to. I think that I would have definitely tried to kill myself again after that had I not had a supportive experience. So that definitely helped me. For you guys as kids who are LGBTQ, and I said this a little bit earlier in the conversation, I think finding a local, again, PFLAG, youth group, finding somewhere that gives them other representation that matters just like that, you know, people that look like them, that have the same experiences, so important. Representation matters. Seeing people who, you know, are like you, look like you, have the same issues as you. As much as you guys love your kids, I don't know that you guys can have the same experience as them, right? So putting them in situations where other people have the same experiences as them allows them to flourish, to talk, to open up, to have community, and have, you know, shared situations. I would say that books wise, I can't really think of any right off the top of my head, so I should have written down a couple of the ones that I really loved. I would say that the TV shows that I just told you again, Disclosure was really, really helpful in kind of tackling media representation. And I think that that's something that you guys could maybe watch. I think that's probably it for right now on that question.